Well, this is episode 27 of Talk That Talk. I'm your host, Fallon Stokes, and I have a very special guest today. We have Courtney English, currently running for Atlanta City Council President. Welcome to the show, Courtney. Welcome.
What's good? What's good? How are you? It's good to be with you.
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for joining me. Really wanted you on the show so my listeners and viewers can really hear about your platform, so they're educated, informed when it's time to go to the voting polls in November. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to start talking about your background, give some details. So you're from the A.
That's right.
With the Fed.
We can really stop there. Yeah.
We can just stop there. You're from Atlanta. Born and raised.
From the A, went to Doug. What else is there? Yeah, I mean, we can close it down.
That's right. So you went to Doug. You're a Morehouse man, graduated from Morehouse, and then went and got your master's from Columbia University. And at a young age, came back to Atlanta and was a teacher, one of the first founding teachers at B.E.S.T Academy, an all-boys school here in Atlanta. And, after that, eventually you joined the Atlanta Board of Education as a member, and then you were the chairman, youngest member at 24 to be elected, and then eventually became chair, voted by your peers, which is very impressive. Previously, you had a run at the Atlanta City Council as well. You didn't win, close margin. I think it was 365 votes you lost that election. But now you're running for Atlanta City Council President. So that's just a little bit about your background. But talk to us about growing up in Atlanta and knowing at a young age that you wanted to be engaged within the community.
Yeah, well, look, I definitely appreciate the intro and all that background. Thank you for everything that you do to provide your listeners with incredible information. I'm a huge fan and follower, in addition to being a friend. So,
awesome.
I love it. Look, I'm so Atlanta's a special place, and it has always been a special place. It holds a special place in the entire world, not just the Southeast, not just America, but in the world. From the cradle of the civil rights movement to teaching folks how to deal with integration, to building the world's busiest airport, to Maynard Jackson creating a generation of Black millionaires in this city through minority participation, to landing the '96 Olympics and a whole host of other issues. Atlanta, there's something special about this city, and it's really rooted in our culture. It's really rooted in the swag, if you will. It's really rooted in the belief that we could be anything. Right. Like this notion that, folks poured into us in very special ways. And so I grew up around that in it. I grew up drinking the Kool-Aid, lock, stock and barrel. And so I didn't know what that path would look like, but I knew I wanted to give back to the city and find an opportunity to serve this city because it had given so much to me. And so, I think we all owe Atlanta a debt of gratitude, whether you were born here like me or whether you chose to move here to call this city home. It really is an incredible place that time and time again demonstrates to the world how to get it right. Simultaneously, I'll say this, though, right? Like all that cool stuff is true, but we've also got some very serious challenges that exist, right? Like for far too long, I think Atlanta has been a tale of two cities, if you will, right? Like I talked about creating those Black millionaires, right? Yeah. Atlanta is home to the third highest concentration of Fortune 500 companies in the world. It's home to the world's busiest airport. We have more Black businesses here per capita than any other city in America. And at the very same time, we're dead last in terms of economic mobility. A kid born into poverty in this city has a 95% chance of dying in poverty in this city. We're near the top in terms of child poverty. We have the highest wage or the largest wage gap than any other city in America. The average white family in this city makes right around $87,000 a year. The average Black family in this city makes right around $25,000 in this year, a year. And so it really is that tale of two cities that inspired me to get involved in public service, from my time in the classroom to my time on the board to my time in the nonprofit sector. And so Atlanta's a special place, but we got some work to do, right? To ensure that it continues to be that special place we know and love.
So, you talked about some of the pitfalls and that you see that are glaring now from when you were growing up. But who were some of your mentors growing up? Anybody that drove you to get into politics?
Oh, wow. I mean, so many people. Like I grew up, I tell stories about so many people poured into my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it came from a variety of places. My mom is definitely at the top of that list. Everything I do really is a byproduct of everything that she poured into me. I watched my mom essentially fight with our government, fight with the public school system to give me the education she thought I deserved.
Right.
And that kind of engendered in me this notion that simply put, no parent should have to fight with their school system to give their kid a good education, right? And so that was my journey, if you will, into public service. My friends, right? I learned a lot. It's cool to have mentors or highfalutin titles. But I got homies like, I bought my childhood home, right? I live on the street I grew up in, grew up on now. And so like my friends are still my friends. And, the story behind that though is, I don't know that there's much difference between them and me. But because of some of the opportunities that I was afforded, I was able to make different decisions for my life. But I still love them. And so I learned a lot from them is the point I'm making. All of my teachers, my pastor, Cameron Alexander, from Antioch Baptist Church, Ed Menifee from the Southwest Atlanta Youth Business Organization. I can name a whole slew of folks who, include my pastor, in fact, who were determined I was going to go to Morehouse at the age of 3. But it's a whole crew of folks, man, who have poured into me. Mine is really a story about praying grandmothers. It's really a story about caring teachers. It's really a story about a mom who just went quick. So
got you. So when you start teaching at B.E.S.T Academy, you were how old were you? You were young, 23, 24, maybe? 22.
Yeah.
And you go into 7th grade. I always talk about middle school is the hardest time for a lot of kids because you're really starting to find yourself. You're dealing with a lot of adversity in school. Sure. So talk about working or teaching at an all boys school and trying to see and shape some of these young black boys, trying to help them grow and see some of the pitfalls that they were facing, especially in Black communities and in the public school system in Atlanta.
Yeah, so it was one of the best experiences that I've had in my entire life. I have no doubt that will remain to be the case. I love my students. I was on the phone actually earlier today, joking with some of my former colleagues who are still there at the school teaching, just talking about, I taught, I coached and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so we were having a conversation about that. I taught 7th grade social studies in the same room I took 7th grade social studies. And, I love those guys because they were a reflection of me. They are a reflection of me. There were a few stories that they could walk into the classroom with that were foreign to me. Right. And so that allowed for us to have really deep conversations that went beyond the academic material we were supposed to be learning. And so it was an incredible experience. Our young Black men, while our kids generally are facing really, really hard times. And the kids I taught were in one of the most underserved communities in the city of Atlanta. It's one of the poorest census tracts in the state of Georgia. And they faced incredible challenges, right? From lack of housing to hunger, to all kinds of crime and violence happening in their neighborhoods. And the biggest thing I learned from them was persistence. Right. No matter what, they came to school ready and expecting to learn. And so, I had to show up for them every single day because they were showing up for their own futures and they never stopped. And we owe it to them to get it right. We owe it to them to close out, to fix all of that bad stuff that we were talking about earlier. But from Josh to Kentavious, the Burke boys. I remember, like their names are really seared in my mind. I taught a whole bunch of Burkes, so it's like 9 of them. I literally taught, and I always joke with folks. I was like, man, when I run out of Burkes, man, I'm getting out of education. Like, because I feel like I taught the whole family. But the point I'm making is really simple. Like they they taught me so much about the city and about what was possible. And like when I decided to run for office the first time, it really wasn't about like, I wish I could tell you I had like these grand designs or grand plans for the school system, this, that, and the third, and I wanted to fix Atlanta. It was really about them. Like I was dead set. I wanted to make sure that they had a great teacher in every classroom and that they had a high quality principal in every school. And I knew that wasn't the case all across the district. And so they were phenomenal kids, man. One quick story I'll tell you, then I'll move on because I can talk about them all day. You know, it really opened my eyes to what wasn't happening for our students. Young man was going crazy in the classroom, right? Like this my first or second year teacher. He's throwing stuff, he's kicking kids, he's doing all the stuff that, you know, you read about, right? Like going wrong in the classroom. I'm pulling to the side. And, you know, I essentially said, look, man, like, what's up, bro? You're going to have to holler at me, man. What's really going on, bro? And like, you know, he essentially said, man, you know, for better or for worse, the stuff I was teaching what I thought was a great lesson about the Incan Aztec. And he essentially said, man, none of that is going to help me feed my little sister tonight. None of it, period, right? And this is a 12-year-old who was effectively the head of household for a few reasons. And, you know, that kind of moment, like, makes it real. One, he's right. You know what I'm saying? Like, he is spot on, right? He is absolutely right in terms of that particular lesson, at least. And then two, like, how do we live in a society where a 12-year-old kid is the head of the household, right? Why is that okay in our city? How did it come to be? And how do we alleviate it? And so those kinds of moments stick out in my mind, you know, as well as, you know, the moments where I see kids walk across the stage and graduate from Stanford or Morehouse and a whole number of colleges, I should say. And so it was truly a transformative experience for me. I learned as much from my kids as I hope they did from me.
Right. No, that's awesome. So you mentioned it, you know, working with those kids helped shape your decision to run as a member for the Atlanta Board of Education, and you ran one in 2009. Yep. So once you joined the board, you know, talk about what were some of the things that you knew that were so glaring that you wanted to accomplish and fix as a member.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was a time where APS had some really dismal academic performance, but here's the deal. Part of the flaw in what others have called the Atlanta way is, and we can get into that later, but like part of the flaw is that Atlanta does a really good job of branding itself as perfect, right? In a whole bunch of aspects. And, you know, the year I joined the board, the year that we found out about what we now know to be the largest cheating scandal in American history.
Right. APS.
Yeah, in APS, right? And so at that same time, though, APS had the National Superintendent of the Year. It had the National School Board of the Year, the National School Board Member of the Year. It was looked at as really a beacon of hope for the entire country, right? Like for how to do education, quote unquote, reform correctly. And all this is going on. At the same time, you know, the graduation rate when I joined the board for overall was right at 50%. The graduation rate for Black men was around 45%. And graduation rate for kids with special needs was 19%. And so, you know, that was the context of it. And so it was like for me and a few others, a host of others, I should say, like the perception wasn't the reality. And for anybody who was inside of a classroom or really knew anything and wanted to be honest about the challenges that Atlanta faced, it just, nah, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like we had to speak some truth to power. And so that was a context, that was the impetus. I mean, there were a whole lot of, there were glaring achievement gaps in the system, and they're glaring achievement gaps now. So I'm not purporting to have fixed all of it, but you know, we can get into that later. But it was a really, really dark time for our school system in the midst of a whole lot of folks who said it was great, and it really wasn't. Yeah.
So yeah, we can talk about that and dive into APS a bit, the cheating scandal. So that was huge. I remember just watching that trial or just working with attorneys, seeing attorneys who represented some of
Yeah,
those educators, and it was tough. It was tough to see it for the city and how it affected, the kids more importantly, but
mhm.
also faculty members,
That's right.
teachers who were in the fight for education and trying to educate these kids. But when you joined, especially when you became chairman,
Yeah,
I know you worked on and found incentives to generate more money for the school system so you could improve on,
yeah,
education, helping these kids get a better experience and get the type of learning they need to improve, move on, or eventually get a job per se.
sure.
So, and under your watch, graduation rates went up 71 to 71% and are continuing to increase. So
79.
79. Okay, you correct me. Thank you.
50, it went from 51 to 79, which is a record high. Yeah, they're actually at 80% now. They hit 80 this
Wow.
year. But during my tenure on the board, we improved graduation rates overall from 51% to 79%. We improved graduation rates for Black men from right around 45% to 76%. We doubled the number of kids who are graduating with special needs, and sent more kids to college, raised teacher pay, put more money into the classroom than ever before. And so, we worked really, really hard to try to make it right for all of our students. And we did a whole host of stuff. I mean, to turn the system around.
Right. Right. And it's totally a different picture than what it looked like, I would say, maybe 8 or 9 years ago,
True. Well,
looking at it
thank
now.
you.
So, now after you make that transition, you decide in 2017 for the first time you wanted to run for Atlanta City Council.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, like I said before, you lost that race. But what did you learn from running in that election? What did you learn about yourself, and what do you see differently as you run for city council president?
Yeah, a lot. I learned a ton about myself. I mean, you want to look. I would rather get beat, right? Like bad, like just beat me up. You know what I mean? But in a space of when 82,000 people vote and you lose by 300 some odd
That's
numbers,
tough.
that stick with you a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That hits different. And so, I mean, but take me aside, jokes aside, I did learn a lot about myself. What I learned about the city, though, and going through that process, really is that our policymakers, a lot of policymakers, not all, do not look at the problems we face in an interconnected fashion, right?
Mhm.
Like if you want to have a conversation about crimes are all the rage in Atlanta right now. It's bad, and I want folks to feel safe as they move around the city. And there's some things we can do to fix that. But long term, if you want to have a serious conversation about crime, you have to have a serious conversation about education. You've got to have a serious conversation about housing and healthcare and food and ultimately jobs. And the city doesn't function or make policy in that way, right?
Right.
Like we make very isolated decisions and then kind of cast a die and hope that it'll work out on the back end. And I talked about kind of the gaps between white students and blacks, or white families and black families earlier. Well, what that translates into from a school system perspective is there's going to be a gap in performance between white students and black students, right?
Right.
Like when white families are making this and black families are making this, there's going to be a gap, period.
Right.
Like point blank period. Anybody tells you anything differently, then know what they're talking about, right?
Mhm.
And so all of these issues that are facing Atlanta have a direct, immediate negative impact on our kids. In fact, they hit our kids and our educators first and hardest. And so like the school system really is the canary in the coal mine for the health of your city. And, if you've got achievement gaps, I'll give you another, housing is another example. APS has about 30% of the kids across the district are going to move in a given year. In the lowest performing schools, that number gets as high as 60%.
Mm.
And every time you move, you effectively lose 3 months of learning, right? And so it's a 6-month school year. I'm sorry, it's a 9-month school year. And they're moving because they're chasing affordable housing, right? And so there's no teaching strategy for that. And so if we want to have a collective, really a holistic conversation about how to improve things for kids, we've got to have a holistic conversation about how we make our communities safer, stronger, and more affordable. So, I mean, that was the biggest eye opener. I did not realize how big that gulf was of thinking between APS and the city. I mean, they're two entities that they're literally across the street from one another. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, look, man, like, you know, you can throw rocks at APS all day long. But if our communities aren't safe, if we don't have access to food, housing, transportation options, our kids are going to have a tough time. And that was really eye-opening for me.
Mm. So piggybacking a little bit off of that, you talk about the crime that's been going on in Atlanta. We're still in a pandemic to an extent, but have opened back up. But, you know, you see the effects, loss of jobs, lack of income, money, lack of affordable housing, like you're saying. Right now, rent has increased. I'm hearing people saying $2,000 a month for an apartment in the lowest areas sometimes in certain cities around the metro Atlanta area is tough. So, you know, right now, the other day, and especially big things we see, mental health, homelessness, you know, especially in the city. What are some ways that you see that you need or we need to combat that to try and, you know, hopefully lower the crime rates that are going on right now in the city and, you know, effectually helping people with mental health and the homeless population? It's not a lot of shelters, no housing really for these people, and no real opportunities to either get the proper treatment for mental health or to even try and get, like you said, affordable housing. So what are some ideas or some ways that you want to help combat that issue in the city?
Yeah. So look, there are a number of things. There are a number of issues that you throw out. I'll take affordable housing first, and just putting it in context. And you talked about it already, how bad that problem is. I mean, you know, I don't get into all the metrics, but one metric I do talk about from an affordability standpoint is you really want to be able to say that, you know, you're spending right around 30% of your income on housing, right? So no matter where you are on the income bracket, right around 30% is a space where, you know, you can kind of make it, you know what I mean? Where you can kind of make it. There are almost 75% of people in this city, in the entire city, are spending upwards of 50% of their income on housing. So I'm gonna say it again, right? 2/3 of this city is spending almost 50% on housing. That's where we are today, right? And so that means there's really no housing for your administrative folks, the folks, your essential workers who help keep the city going, your folks who are serving food in the cafeteria, making sure our babies are fed, your folks who are driving buses. There's really no affordable housing for police officers, firefighters, teachers, the folks who are, all these folks that we say are critical, right? Like there's really no housing market for them right now. So that's one end of it. And so the city's got to do a few things to address that. Number one, we need a dedicated stream of revenue for affordable housing that does not exist right now. We need folks investing. We need to make sure the city's consistently investing in affordable housing every single year. And to me, that's going to take a dedicated stream of revenue. Number two, we've got to use the resources at our disposal. And that means two things. One, the city has almost 300 acres of land via the Atlanta Housing Authority that really they haven't built anything on in any substantive fashion in about 10 years. The one entity that's in charge of building affordable housing hasn't built any affordable housing, right? Like that's flawed. You know what I mean? And that's real low hanging fruit and flawed. Number three, we've got to use all of our assets, right? Meaning, you know, as I was leaving the board, we created the APS Affordable Housing Task Force, which looked at repurposing vacant school buildings into affordable housing units. Okay. And the city needs to take that same approach. And so when we use vacant city land, vacant buildings, vacant schools, and repurpose those into not just affordable housing units, but green space and other amenities for the communities get stronger. Those are just three things. I can go down a rabbit hole on affordable housing conversation. Homelessness, it dovetail really well into homelessness though, right? Like the more housing stock you provide, the cheaper housing gets for everyone else. I currently believe that we just need to house the homeless. Like we need to create low barrier homeless shelters. Right now, there are few, if any at all, what I call low barrier homeless shelters in the city. And low barrier means there's no intake process, meaning like for a number of the shelters, you got to be, drug free, alcohol free, and so forth. You got to be able to demonstrate some of them. You got to pay. If not a direct fee to get in the door. You got to pay to wash your clothes and all that kind of stuff. I get it. Right. I get it. But if I'm addicted to drugs, I need treatment. I'm probably not going to need the treatment I need sleeping under the bridge. So we are collectively better off by housing the homeless and then providing them with the kind of mental health supports in the event that that's what they actually need. Right. And many of them do. And that's really I'm not trying to make the problem seem smaller than it is, but that's really the only long-term answer, right? Is you have to get folks in a safe, stable place, and you got to give them access to the resources, point blank, period. And we're not doing that right now. And so the city kind of got into that during the pandemic. But if folks aren't in a place where you can get them access to services, you're gonna be spinning your wheels on that problem for years to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just another topic I want to talk about. You talk about accessibility in Atlanta or the city, maybe building more rail lines, improving the roads or the streets in Atlanta. I know one thing for sure that I hate, it's an eyesore for me, is that Atlanta's streetcar downtown or whatever it is. To me, it serves no purpose. And I work right near it.
Yeah.
So I know it was supposed to be an attraction for tourists. We got to the city. But it takes you nowhere except for around that little circular area around Centennial and maybe
working.
Right. So
it is working.
Back then it was a lot of money that was invested to build it that probably could have gone to better resources, maybe extended MARTA rail lines. I'm not sure. But I'm here to talk to you about it. What are some ways that you think we can make accessibility better in Atlanta?
So I think about that. It's funny that if you talk to anybody who listens to me long enough when I talk about transportation, I rail on the streetcar. So like I don't get it. It doesn't work. It's slow to stop. I mean, it's just it's the idea. I understand the concept, right? And if you told me you're going to put a streetcar on Campbellton Road to increase accessibility to Southwest Atlanta, which is development, hey, look, sign me up, champ. Right? That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Right. But I'll say this, right? Like knowing that the point I want to make is we got to take common sense to high places. And I think Atlanta has had a trend of being attracted to shiny projects, right? Like cool stuff. It's like, cool. We want to be able to say we the biggest, we the best at this, we the fastest, so on and so forth. I'm like, look, let's fill some potholes first.
Right.
Like let's do that.
Tires.
Yeah, we got a streetcar, but we can't fill a pothole to save our life, right? Like I'm not, if you love streetcar and you're listening, look, good for you. But that pothole is a problem. Mm-hmm. The lack of sidewalks in our neighborhoods, particularly Black neighborhoods, is a huge problem. It's a huge safety risk for our kids. It's a huge accessibility problem for seniors. It's a huge problem for folks who are disabled, and like we got to take care of the basics, right? And right now there's about $1 billion backlog in infrastructure projects throughout the city that just hadn't been attended to, and that's potholes, that's sidewalks, there's bike lanes, so on and so forth. When you talk about accessibility, the long and short of it is the more options you give people to move around, the more they'll take, right? And so it's also an important conversation when you talk about economic development in communities, particularly underserved communities, particularly Black communities that have been starved of development. Those communities were essentially redlined and they were intentionally starved. And because you didn't have a way to move in and or out of them, they weren't able to suck in the kinds of jobs, grocery stores, or other amenities that you see have to pop up all across the city. And so, I talked about the Campbellton Road corridor before, but that is a very specific corridor. That's a growth area for the city that desperately needs either, a rail line going down it or bus rapid transit,
Right.
to assist with economic development, right? And so it's both an accessibility conversation because we want to make sure folks are able to move throughout the city, but it's also a conversation around improving economic outcomes and helping folks move their way up the economic ladder. And so we need to build more stuff, and we need to build it faster, and we need to take care of the basics of government.
Right. So if elected city council president, what are some of the first things that you want to do once you get into office?
Yeah, a few things. Look, we are grappling with still the ongoing effects of a global pandemic that has devastated the city of Atlanta. I had was blessed enough to be able to help lead an eviction relief fund this past year. We started off trying to raise about $50,000 to help folks stay in their homes, to help our residents actually stay in their homes. Ended up raising $10 million and serving over 4,000 families as of this week, actually. The reason I flagged that, though, is because the eviction moratoriums that we've seen are actually expiring at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. There are roughly 22,000 pending evictions in Fulton County alone. Mm-hmm. And these are evictions that are already filed, to say nothing of the folks who still owe, right? Like these evictions had been filed, they just haven't been able to be processed.
Right.
20,000 of them, right? And then to say nothing of the folks who owe $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, or $10,000 in back rent and are ultimately going to face eviction. So priority one for me is ensuring that our eviction relief efforts are at the city level are putting resources and money in the hands of folks who can need it so that they can stay in their homes. That's going to have to be a huge priority for anybody who takes office, from the mayor, council, school board on down, because if you don't get that right, what it means is you're gonna have a slew of folks on the street, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one bucket of work. Obviously, dealing with the impact of this crime wave that we are currently seeing. It's a 60% spike in violent crime, and there's some things we can do in the short term to improve that. We do need to increase the size of what I call our public safety force. And so, sure, our police are a part of that ecosystem, but so are folks working in police alternatives, right? Mental health professionals, folks who can respond to nonviolent calls have to be a part of that conversation. And so we've got to ramp that up in a very real way to ensure that folks have access to the emergency services that they need, God forbid something happens, but right. also the mental health services that they need as well. Those two things stick out in the short, in the very, like, we've got to get on those two things like yesterday, right? Like you have, and if you fail to address a looming housing crisis, right? Like, or a looming eviction crisis, it will exacerbate your crime. It will exacerbate your homelessness. It will exacerbate economic instability. It will exacerbate the wage gap. It will make it harder for kids to learn. And so those two things stick out for me as like kind of day one. Don't pass go, don't collect, don't set up the office, if you will, don't unpack. Like, we going to work on this stuff right here, right now.
I got you. So I always like to end the show with the triple TQs. I call them the talk that talk questions. So I got 3 questions for you, and then you just give me your response off the top of your head. All right, you ready for it?
Yep.
So what is the advice that you would give to people who aspire to get into politics or, be a civic leader?
Yeah, do it I'll say this: find your why. Mm-hmm. Like this is a tough business. It's a blood sport. It's brass knuckles, sharp elbows, and you got to be in this for people. And when you get to these positions and titles, wherever they may be, elected, appointed, or otherwise, like, you got to remember where you come from. And for me, that's finding your why. So, I talked a lot about, my mom and remembering her story, my friends remembering their stories, and my students and knowing their stories. Like, whatever that it is, that thing that keeps you up at night, that thing that you would do for free. If it's leading you to public service, you got to hold on to that thing, have a clear picture of what it is. And like I said, hold on to it like the world's coming to an end, right? Because for all the people that you are trying to serve, for far too many of them, the world is coming to an end. And unless in one way, shape, form, or fashion or another. And so, like, find your why, know your why, and don't let it go.
All right, the second question. Explain the impact your efforts, or you would like your efforts when elected city council president. How would you like your efforts to affect the Atlanta community in just shaping your term?
Look, we're going to build a city that works for everyone. I want Atlanta to be the destination of choice for all those who want to build big dreams. Whether you're born and raised here or you want to move here or you did move here, I want you to be able to achieve whatever that dream is, whatever that why is for you or your family. I want to make sure that you can do that in Atlanta. And right now, that's not the case for far too many people. For, some folks, Atlanta works great.
Right.
It is a phenomenal place to live, and, absent, a pothole here or there, some crime here or there, some traffic here or there, you're fine. Right. But for far too many people who are trapped in a vicious cycle of generational poverty, who still love this city very much. Right. Like you couldn't tell us nothing. Like you couldn't tell me nothing was wrong. Like, look, I'm straight, like period, point blank, period. But simultaneously, like it's too hard for too many people to work their way into the middle class and work their way into wealth in this city. And it shouldn't be that hard. Right. Like this city has built this back. And I'm unapologetically Black. So like this city has built its reputation on Black culture, right? On it's, some folks will say it's our biggest export. And so Black people in Atlanta shouldn't be doing as bad in as many cases. And so long story short, we're going to close those gaps, right? So income gap is going to close, folks. So it'll be easier for folks to work their way up the economic ladder. And ultimately Atlanta will be a place where everyone can thrive.
Like it. And the last question, what is the legacy that you want to leave for future generations?
Yeah, that's deep. Quick story. I'm sorry. I got the story.
Go with it.
On the point. Like I was working with a nonprofit organization, and this nonprofit organization wrote into their mission that they wanted to be an enduring American institution. And that struck me really profoundly because it was an organization that was dedicated to solving a really, really serious problem.
Okay.
And at some point, I feel like you've got to solve the problem. And if you solve the problem, right, like you no longer, I feel like you need to work your way out of existence, actually. Yeah, I mean, if you fixed it, it's fixed. Right. And if you want to hang around, right, sure, there's all kinds of stuff and so anyway, the point I'm making is this. Like my ultimate legacy, I want to say a few things. One, I don't want folks coming behind me working on the same problems that I've had to work on. Right. And so like right now we're having a conversation about economic inequality and lack of economic mobility, lack of accessibility. We're talking about, undoing the negative effects of redlining and bringing folks together and creating more options. Like go work on a new problem. Like, let me get this one. You know what I'm saying? And so ultimately, like if it's 30 years from now, right, and the city council, the school board are, they're trying to figure out, look, man, we need a beach in Atlanta, and we trying to spend like we need high speed rail to Savannah.
That's one thing I always say. Atlanta, we just don't need it. If we had a beach,
we don't, man. It'd be real bad. Like it'd be Babylon. It'd be crazy. It'd be nuts. You know what I'm saying? Like it'd be real bad. But if that's an issue, like I want my ultimate legacy to be in public service is that like I left things better than when I found them, and that I did it so well. We collectively, it's not about me. We collectively did it so well that the next generation could work on something else, right? Like it's not to say that the problem is solved forever, right? But it, we hammered the nail in pretty strong. You know what I'm saying?
It's sturdy. It's still in place.
Yeah, it's pretty sturdy, man. You might need to refurbish it. You know what I mean, might need a renovation, so on and so forth. But it's a solid foundation for you to build on, and you got to go find another problem to fix, right? Like there will always be challenges that our city faces, and ultimately, that's my biggest lesson. One of the things I think about. The other thing I think about is I just want to see more young folks involved in the process. Period. Like when I got elected, I was the youngest, this, that, and the third, right? I was always the youngest person in the room. And it pleases me like to know, I mean, it's not an anomaly, right? See, I was 23 when I got elected, right? Or so when I started running for office, there's a 19-year-old kid right now who graduated from Grady High School 2 years ago who's running for school board.
Nice.
Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's dope. He's still in my young guy thunder, but like, you know what I mean? Like, that's cool with me. You know what I mean? And like if those two things are in place, you know, it'll be time well served.
I like it, Courtney. That was that's a good story. Good story. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining the podcast. You were awesome. This was a great conversation, but feel free to tell my listeners and viewers any future speaking engagements you may have, you know, where they can find you, shout you out if they have questions, Instagram, whatever you want to tell them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for that, for this opportunity. Dope conversation as always. Look, you can find me on all social media platforms. Courtney English Facebook, Courtney English on Twitter, Courtney English the 4 ATL on Instagram. Again, Courtney English the number 4 ATL. You can just type in my name though, and it'll pop up. But same thing for all your social media platforms. You can follow the campaign there. You can also follow the campaign on my website. Is CourtneyEnglish.com. Real simple. CourtneyEnglish.com is the website. You can click a button to donate, to volunteer, to find out about events and just to track the activities of the campaign. All that's on the website, and we would love to have you. You know, this is a grassroots movement, and we need as many people as we possibly can to join this movement and help us build a safer, stronger, more equitable Atlanta.
Oh, awesome. Well, it was great having you. I'm glad you could join. I'm be following you. I'm rooting for you, and I just want to shout out the election this year is November 2nd.
Right.
And you have to be a registered voter, and at least in the city of Atlanta, to vote by October 4th. So if they haven't done it, do it now. Make sure you're able to vote. It's going to be a big time election. We have Atlanta mayor, that position coming, city council president, city council members, as well as board members of the Atlanta Board of Education, and municipal court members or judges. So it's a lot of campaigns and elections coming up, so they need to be informed. And I thank you for joining, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Fallon. Let's get it.
All right, let's get it. I'll see you soon. Have a good one.
All right, talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. Well, that was another great interview. I had the pleasure of having Courtney English running for Atlanta City Council president on the podcast. He had a great conversation with me just about his journey growing up in Atlanta, born and raised, high school, college, and, went to Columbia University to get his master's degree and extend his education, but has always been grassroots and grounded in Atlanta, has come back to help his city, lives in his childhood home, he even said, but gave us some great information, especially about his platform. So please follow Courtney English on his social media platforms. And if you are living in the city of Atlanta, read more about him, be informed, educated. This is a big time election coming up in November. So like we said, we fought hard for the presidential election that just passed in 2020, but the local elections are even more important because it involves what's going on in our city, and we can influence that, make a difference by just participating and voting. So this was a good one. Thank you, Courtney English, for joining the show. So this week, I want to give the Black Business shout out for the week. And the Black Business shout out is going to Rakay Brogdon. She owns a women's clothing line boutique called Fashionista. She's the owner and operator, founder. And this online boutique is catering to women of all shapes and sizes. You'll be able to find something that's in your style and size. So go check out the website. She also has swimwear, dresses, shorts, shirts, accessories, jewelry, shoes, you name it, she has it. So make sure you go and support this Black female doing great things in the city as a Black business owner, and support her online store, because when we have business owners doing great things in the community, we have to support them. This is another one. So go to Fashionista, click the site, look around, find some stuff you like, buy it, and that's the Black Business shout out for the week. So again, go shop at Fashionista and go support Rakay Brogdon. But this was another great episode 27 of Talk That Talk. I had the pleasure of having Courtney English on this episode, and he was amazing, gave us some great information about his platform, the pitfalls we see in the city right now in Atlanta, and the ways we need to improve accessibility, education, and a slew of other things to make the city of Atlanta a better place for its citizens. But again, if you want to follow Courtney English and hear more about his platform, go follow his social media accounts or just go and read up on him. You can Google him, you'll find him. But this was another great episode, episode 27. Until the next time, we'll see you next time.